The second filter that we want to emphasize is the idea of limitations. And honestly, I don't know that we really think too much about this, but we ought to think more about it. That is, when we're getting our information, whatever the information is, understand that we're all limited in lots of different ways. I'm just going to suggest 5 to us. The first one is space and time. We can only be in one place at one time. We all know that. But the bottom line is we can't do it all, even though we think we might be able to. The second is life and death. I'm not so sure that I need to bring that up, but at least to acknowledge it, to understand that we live and then we die. The very famous line that comes out of a great quote is that 1 out of 1 people die. And so that's one of the limitations that we have. We need to expect that and understand it. The third is knowledge and understanding. And I would argue that there's a difference between knowledge and understanding. Knowledge is the stuff that we're after, the research, we're reading all of these things. The understanding is the interpretive analysis that we might bring to it, but we're all limited. We can only take in so much. The fourth is our experience and our culture. My experience different than yours, my culture different than yours. Very important that we understand that and that we acknowledge that with other people when we're dealing with whatever discussions we might be having with them, whatever questions that we might be engaging along the way. The fifth is one, again, some folks don't want to think about this too much, but quite frankly, it's a very important one, and that is that there's a lot of ambiguity and mystery in life. There are things we know, there's things that we don't know. In fact, there are things that we don't know that we will never know. These are mysterious issues. That, of course, takes into account religious kinds of concepts. Again, something that the humanities needs to deal more with in the School of Liberal Arts, for instance. But we want to make sure at least to acknowledge these 5 arenas. Now I wanted to suggest to you something that happens all the time. And this is what we all do. None of us has passed this, including me. We all have our assumptions that we believe in. So I represent that by a circle. Now, what happens when we get new knowledge? What happens when we learn something brand new? Most of us, if we're really honest with ourselves, we try to fit that new knowledge inside of our assumptions so that we literally have a triangle inside the circle. What we ought to do is we ought to evaluate all things, whether it be knowledge or whether it be our assumptions, and ask ourselves the question, are these things right or true? And then, of course, engage the knowledge that we might be getting and ask the question, okay, just because it's new doesn't necessarily mean it's right. So we have lots of questions to ask in that regard. So, along that way, 5 ideas I'd like to leave with us here in this short video about how do we deal with our limitations. 5 things. First, recognize our weaknesses. We all have them. We all come from different points of view. Acknowledge that. The second is state our assumptions. One of the things that really aggravates me is that when I will state my assumptions, other people don't want to state theirs. So be sure to be honest with everybody that you're having conversation with, whatever the case. Number 3, to understand our differences. I mean, some of these things should be quite obvious to us, as plain as the nose on our face is the famous line. But honestly, a lot of us don't want to think about our differences or try to understand somebody else's. But understand that's a really crucial issue. Number 4, consider our backgrounds. We all come from different points of view. And I'm not just talking about our differences, I'm talking about where we grew up, our time and place, what country, what nationality, what languages, all kinds of things here. And then 5th, we need to create accountability. And quite frankly, that's part of what we do in classes. It's part of what we do in university. And that is that we create ideas that are based on research. We're creating papers. We're creating assignments so that we can better understand ourselves, our world, other people, and then, of course, understand our limitations within all of that. This is one of the crucial filters that we've talked about before. All of our information passes through these. Limitations is filter number 2.